All right. Okay. So I'd quickly like to introduce the panel. So we have Mohamed-Hédi Charki, you're Associate Professor at EDIC Business School. We have Samantha Woods, Vice President of Human Resources, Innovation and External Relations, and also Employee Experience and Employer Attractiveness at Orange. So it's quite a substantial title, Samantha. So looking at your perspective would be very interesting as well. And then we have Jon Ingham, People Strategist, and you're going to share your view, I'd say, as an exchange as well. We've seen a lot of stuff about chatbots, we've seen AI, we've seen interactive brokering going on, leading to a different type of self-service for people. What is your view? What is the next step? What's going to happen now that you've seen the exchanges? In a nutshell, what do you take away from today? Samantha, the lady on the panel, will start with you. What do you take away from what you've seen so far?
Well, strangely, I'm really impressed with all the technology I saw. There's no doubt about that, and I really like the ideas of making the life of the HR people much easier, and the chatbot will really help, I believe. In Orange, I just have something specific, is that we have 5 generations in our company, and we don't like to cut down people. And that's something we really are, it's in the heart of our DNA. So we have to embark.
It's one of your values, I presume.
Yes. It's not an easy exercise when you're in digital transformation. So we really have to be sure that everybody's embarked on all these technologies. We have strong unions in different territories. We're present in 110 countries, but in Europe, unions are very, very strong. So we have to be sure that everybody understands where we're going. And what we're doing and how this will bring value to the business. So the human dimension of all this digital transformation is essential and critical for us. So what I think is key for HR is to understand all these trends that are happening, all these trends, but also anticipate all the issues and fears and challenges for people who are in business today.
Great, yeah, because we just heard from the example of Steve and Kieran that essentially Goldie would not, substantially change the workforce that's in the HR Service Center, but that seems quite a daunting challenge indeed, right? If you look at some industries, the forecast is that in these types of jobs, about 40% of them will vanish in the next 5 to 7 years. So it's a very short period of time. So I'm glad you point that out, that inclusiveness and the fact that you're 5 generations. Very good. Thank you for that. Jon, how's your view? What do you take away from what you've seen so far?
Well, I think Steve's summary at the end of his session and quite a few of the other conversations we've had as well have been about that shift from simply sort of focusing at what technology can now do to focusing on the things that technology enables us to do. So instead of doing the basic service center calls, it's adding, creating more value. I think AI is still a big part of that. I think we do need to keep paying attention to some of the other technologies, things like virtual, augmented reality, holograms, all of these sort of things, I think are going to help us connect and do our jobs better. And to me, that's where the focus needs to be. I do think, very short term, we're still implementing things like ERP that, again, I know have come up a few times. A little bit more medium term, we've still got to sort of be deep into analytics and all of these things to sort of help AI move forward. But, it's not going to be that long until AI can do most of those things. And then the key is, how do we really do some really interesting things? So that's where, I think HR really needs to be focusing. How does HR work in a more almost sort of an artful, very human type of way?
So it becomes more human-centric thanks to technology in a way.
Yeah, and clearly it already
reality.
is.
Yes.
But even more
is that really the case? Is it really already human-centric?
Well,
Because I had a session this morning which is called the tech fallacy, where I actually say, not necessarily, I think you're there, right? In the sense that we apply all this technology, but not necessarily leading to a better experience or higher productivity. But what you're saying is potentially we're on the threshold where this is now happening.
I think it already is, and I'm looking forward to Volker's session on employee experience next, because that's another new piece that we definitely need to add to this agenda. I just think it's such an interesting time, because there is evidence that in many ways the workplace is increasingly dehumanized. A lot of the ways that we treat people now are just completely inappropriate for the time that we live in. But I mean, certainly, so I've been sort of tweeting on quite a few of the sessions, but keeping an eye on sort of what else is happening on Twitter. And certainly if you're into social media, the number of conversations going on about sort of more human ways of doing things. And this isn't just about people like me. This is, an increasing number of chief executives are stressing there's a new way of managing things. And I think if we're not aware that we're on a horizon of a completely different way to operate, we're not paying enough attention.
Very good. Okay, that's very inspiring. Thank you. And then I say Mohamed-Hédi.
So my takeaway is that, first of all, it's impressive the extent to which artificial intelligence is destroying such a huge amount of jobs. But on the other hand, it is creating new jobs. So I'm here to tell you that I have fantastic news for all HR practitioners, that there is one thing artificial intelligence will never be able to do, and will never be able to substitute human resources for it. This thing is your employees' creativity. Actually, what do I mean? So actually, artificial intelligence is impressive when it comes to efficiency, when it comes to productivity, when it comes to being able to find a solution that was somehow found before. But being able to create something new from scratch, being able to connect things that no one connected before, being able to completely thinking about ecosystems of business, about interconnected different entities in order to create an unexpected and non-existing value, for the moment being, and as far as I know, AI cannot do so. The only people who can do so are us, human beings. We can do so. One fantastic study was done by IBM in 2011 about the first most important thing that is crucial for CEOs. It was employees' creativity. So I do believe that despite all the enthusiasm about artificial intelligence and all the new jobs being created by AI, that's fantastic, sure. But I think that the challenge of human resource practitioners is to think about how to create, nurture, develop your employees' creativity. I think all HR people think about the acquisition of talents, about the development of talents, about retaining, etc. But I don't really see in a systematic way focus on our employees' creativity. And all creativity, I mean, four things. I think about creativity not only as an idea generation. Idea generation is only the beginning of the creativity journey in your organization. Generally speaking, you have 4 typical phases in creativity. You have idea generation, then you have idea elaboration, brainstorming, exchanging ideas with folks, with colleagues from different departments, different divisions. Then you have idea championing, being able to champion my idea to different deciders, key decision makers, and then idea implementation. And by idea implementation, we speak about innovativeness. So I think that these steps and employee creativity need to be at the top of your agenda.
Very good. So I'd like to say what we've heard so far from the panel and the takeaways of the day are a lot of attention from you, Samantha, on inclusion, inclusive introduction of technology and transformation, 5 generations, different levels of experience and expertise, and also expectations of employees. From you, Jon, that actually the user experience is already there. technology is being applied in a great way because it already enhanced the experience of the employees. And for you, Mohamed-Hédi, you're saying there's a lot more attention should be on how that can enhance creativity, and that's going to be the goal of the future. So I'd like to ask the people now in the audience. Yes,
add
of course.
something because
sure.
I had to begin, so I didn't have time to think about my answer.
Absolutely
but
fair.
I must say that I was a bit, not terrified, but surprised by the IBM tool, which enables to discover your personal traits on, I suppose, the data that was from Google and all the different stuff. And I thought that was very personal. So I said, wow, if you don't have a digital presence on the web or I don't know where, LinkedIn or that sort of thing, how do you come out and how do you evaluate this person if he's not present on the web or a social network? So but I was very impressed. I'm gonna do the test, but I don't know how to feel about it. So I was a bit, shocked. And the other one was the cognitive pay solution. So once again, wow, this is impressive, but how can you make sure that it's also fair? Is it only the digital and social network, internal network that enables to build the data? Where is the human part in this solution? But I was quite impressed by the techno.
Yeah, you could always look at the application, right? What do you do with this information, and to who is this information available? To who is the information passed on? All those things are very interesting questions. So thank you, Samantha, for that second thought on what's sort of in your mind as you go through these experiences of listening to that information and looking at that. Now, any comments, just like I asked the panel, takeaways from the day to bring it back into the group? What do you say? You've looked at this from your professional backgrounds. Is there anyone who would like to share some takeaways similarly to what Samantha maybe just said, like the pros and cons, the provocation of what this does? Yes. Kevin.
There's, and this happens with the adoption of a number of new technologies. There's this underlying tone that that's for other people, and hey, people, watch, it's coming, and it's affecting other people. Do you have any individual experiences on either what are you going to do about AI? How are you individually taking steps to be more relevant in an AI world? Or what are some of your implications for you personally? Because the implications aren't just for others, they're for everyone in the room here. We just have to remember that. So, putting you on the spot, I appreciate it, but...
Great question. What are you going to do from a, let's say, personal level with AI, making a better experience, a different experience?
Is it personal or professional? You go.
Okay, so firstly, I'm here. You know, things are changing so rapidly. We need to keep up to speed with what's going on. I think one of the impacts of AI and everything else we're talking about is increasingly we need to learn much deeper, smarter, faster than we've ever done before. And I think the amount of time that most people, including in HR, put into their own learning is nowhere near as much as we need to do. Secondly, the other thing I really like to do is to question chatbots to try to work out whether they are human or digital. I have to say my success rate is really, really low, but I do quite enjoy it. But sometimes you do have to apologize if it's a human because they're not always that pleased to have been confused with AI. And the third thing, for me, the most interesting thing is what does AI enable us to do differently? It's not just about understanding AI and how AI changes or reduces people's jobs, but it's what happens after AI has taken effect. So, yeah, I mean, creativity, I think, is a growing role within what we do as well. Although I'm not so convinced. I mean, Watson's quite creative as well, isn't it? I mean, it's things like the chocolate burritos competition where it came up with a new food that nobody else had ever cooked before. AI can be creative. My understanding is the only thing that we expect AI not to be able to do in the future is relationships with each other. So, to me, that's got to be at the core of the future of HR. So that's where I spend a lot of my time. How do we shift to really understand the way we work together and to get better at doing that?
Very good. Excellent. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. To jump on your feedback, thank you for this. Actually, there is AI can do fantastic job, and I do agree. It can lead to creativity when it links existing entities in new ways. Okay, it can be, but the entities exist. However, bringing new entities, new units of analysis, new ecosystem that do not exist at all from scratch, AI will never be able to do it. This is, God willing, something that only human beings can do. Now, my feedback when it comes to AI is that how I see it personally and professionally, is that AI will ease our search. As you know, and this is notably valid for large organizations, we spend a huge amount of time searching for information, searching for who is my ideal interlocutor for this topic, who knows the solution of this for this problem, who I can rely on to get my stuff done. So we lose a lot of time. So I am convinced that AI will be able to help us reduce to a large extent this period of time that we spend searching for answers, both at the personal level and at the professional level. That I call the meta-knowledge, who knows whom and who knows what. So AI will be in a very easy way able to tell you, you need to talk to this person. This person worked on that kind of project a few years ago. It is on the same technical concept. You need to explore that kind of repository. That kind of repository has the information you need. And AI will be able to do it in a proactive way without me soliciting the machine, hey, please help me to find. AI will be able to proactively tell me where I can find the information. Now, what happens is that when we are searching for something, actually we ask our colleagues, okay, in the offline world, or we put a note in our social post, in our social media, in our company, saying, hey, I'm looking for a solution for this problem. But the problem is then I will be relying on the agency of my colleagues who are willing and who are available or not to answer my question. AI will help me getting rid of the potential agency of my colleagues. The AI will tell me where I can find the information. So I think that in terms of efficiency and gain of time in terms of search, both at the personal level and at the professional level, AI will do a great job.
So that's where you would then start saying you're going to answer Kevin's question. That's going to be important for you. It sounds like it's going to create even more and potentially game-changing, to use it with Gordon's words, cognitive shortcuts, right? In which we can say repetitive cognitive work will decrease, and that's giving the argument back to you in a sense, saying creative work will increase because you now no longer have to do cognitive repetitive tasks, which AI can do for you, and you can now invest your time in new value creation, that type of stuff, which goes into the direction of what you were saying. I'm a little bit surprised that there's little sense, except for what Samantha was saying earlier on the ethical aspect. Because Samantha, you were referring to, you put this letter in, then you find what you're like, basically, and that you don't have a lot of fun in life, potentially, because of a letter that you've written. And what are the, let's say, what are the consequences of that? Because if that data is available, that data is going around everywhere, what does it say about you? And how does that lead you potentially to bias in everything you do? We already have that, by the way, right now in credit ratings, in mortgage lending, in lots of different services that are available or not available or expensive or cheap for us based on what a system has decided about us because of our behaviors, because of we've driven too fast in a car that was in a car sharing platform, and because the car sharing platform shares that data with an insurance company, they know that we have a tendency to drive too fast. So suddenly we have a little bit of a more expensive insurance policy. So all those things which are great applications from an AI perspective, especially for industry, but not necessarily for the individual and individual integrity. Samantha, you were referring to that a little bit when you were talking about what you saw. What is your view on that?
So, yes, you have to be very, very careful on your digital footprint, I believe, to secure your personal life. So that's why it was a bit difficult for me to answer straight away, because personal life, we all want to be human augmented people and smarter and go faster. And at the same time, I really believe freedom isn't always digital. So be careful of the footprint you leave on the digital web. Children, my children are 20. They're in high schools, engineer schools, and sales business schools. They're very careful of what they're leaving on the web today, which this has changed. It's not the case for 25 and 25 to 30, but now they're very cautious of what they leave.
Like the 15 to 20-year-olds are very much more cautious than the 25-year-olds.
Much more cautious.
Yeah, so there's a change there.
Right. On the ethical side, I think it's the role of big companies, and there's lots of big companies in this room, to be very careful of how we are changing the world in a way, and respect people's intimacy, and also in the company, we have to be fair and also always preserve this human relationship and intuition we have with people who want to progress in the company. Digital can help you take a lot of decisions. It's really brilliant for that, and we are testing lots of things. We're already testing 5G in Orange and how this can change also your way of working. The connection with things, Internet of Things, is just massive. All this intelligence that we're going to be surrounded by. But at the same time, we have to preserve the human dimension of the people who work in the company and also in the world. I know it's a bit visionary.
No, it's actually like
and I didn't go in any coffee shop just to be sure that.
No, well, maybe tonight. There are great coffee shops around. But to actually just ask you a side question, is that question. Do you then see, because you've taken Kevin's question as from a very personal perspective, but also a very corporate perspective. If you look at it from a corporate perspective, do you see it the role of HR in the future to protect employees against a harmful digital footprint? Would there be trainings on that and say how do you behave?
Yes, we already do major trainings on cyber defense and cyber security for the people, for the employees. We're very cautious on that, and so they don't give too much information on the phishing and all that sort of thing. Another one on the corporate side is that, so I'm based in France, we have lots of engineers, and we have to keep our engineers in France, or at least in Europe, and they're all going, as you know, the head of artificial intelligence in the big GAFAs, they're all French. So there's a topic there also, come on guys and women, stay with us in Europe, and we want the intelligence to stay here also. So there's something we have to work on collectively as a society. Is
to stop a brain drain or to...
they're all going over there, and we want the intelligence also to be... in Europe, even in England, even if the Brexit doesn't matter, but we want the intelligence to stay here because we have to compete or work, or partner, but with the big actors in the US and also in Asia. So we need to have a role in that.
Very good. Now, one more pivot to the public and to the audience tonight. And say that question of how you would apply AI. Is there anything anyone has learned here today to say, I take that away, and that is what I'm going to implement in my organization tomorrow, or that is going to influence me to change something, set a different agenda as you walk out of here tomorrow? Is there anything that has inspired you for that? Yes.
Well, the story of EY, that they implemented a chatbot, Goldie, in only 30 days, or less than 30 days, inspired really by, well, let's just do it. I work at Interaction, which is a co-location data center provider in Europe. We have SuccessFactors as our main HR system. Based on all the questions we have, that is always the known answers, and that is calling your HR representative. Why don't we use a chatbot and, learn from that and be more effective in answering those questions?
Very good. Okay. Yes, we have one more, and then we're going to close the panel because I think our next speaker is almost ready to fly. So here we go.
Yeah, it's also in the area of chatbots, but I was just thinking we have quite some issues with integrating new hires. It's very difficult for them to navigate in all the area of practices, even pure administrative stuff. How do you get your benefit card? How do you report your expenses? How do you report your mobile phone bills, and etc. And they really struggle to find a person to find an answer. Now, listening to Steve, he said it was easy to implement Goldie in 30 days because it was a totally new system, and therefore we knew where all the data storage was. And I think he mentioned that they're struggling with how do they actually compile all the data from historical processes and where data is sometimes stored in the head and in the drawers and stuff. So I think this is the biggest difficulty we might be facing with that particular process.
Right, so your takeaway is very interesting as well, because I found that revealing that it's been much more in this Goldie example of AY, a question of having a very simple system and then populating it later on, and not worry about it too much because you're going for a type of prototype, and then you'll see how you make it perfect in the end. That's great that you take that away. I'd say to close the session.
There's a new job. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's a bot trainer.
A bot trainer.
Yeah, to train your bots.
Wow.
That's a new role that we have
Is
identified.
Is that a systems role or is it a human role?
It's more a systems role, but it is an important role that we have identified, is to be able to train bots.
Okay, but it will be done by a machine.
Oh no, a human for the meantime.
Oh, for a human. Yeah, okay, so that's why when I said systems, I should have asked machine. So it's still a human role. So that's optimistic because that's still a human role. There's lots of work for humans around.
For the moment, let's see if a bot will train the bots.
Yeah. Well, then to keep it optimistic, I'd say regardless of whether it's going to be replaced or not, then that will create another human role in the end. If we see it like that, it's much more circular and it doesn't have to be brutal and bloody in the end. Great to have you on this panel. A round of applause, please, for our panel today. Thank you.